Tensions are on the rise in the South China Sea. The Philippines and China have clashed in the disputed waterway, where vessels from both sides collided. China's Coast Guard fired a water cannon at Philippine vessels.
The external security environment is becoming more complex. It is becoming more unpredictable.
But if conflict was to break out, is the Philippines military prepared to handle it?
That is why the Army must always be fully prepared and capable for any contingencies, especially considering you are the country's last line of defense against any external security threat.
The Philippines has long pledged to upgrade its military. Its top military officials rolled out a 3-stage program in 2013 to be completed over 15 years. The multi-billion-dollar upgrade was dubbed Horizon 1, 2, and 3. That was 10 years ago, but how far have they come? Budget limitations as well as the COVID-19 pandemic have delayed progress by many years.
Horizon 1 was supposed to have finished in 2018, but last month the defense chief the armed forces chief said that it was still only about 90% complete, and Horizon 2 is maybe only at the 50% mark. Horizon 3 hasn't started because they've delayed planning to kind of take stock of where things are. So on the whole, it's really behind schedule.
That was reporter Sophie Chu, who has covered this issue for The Post. Why is it being discussed now?
Manila considers it urgent to really modernize the military now because of China's increasing assertiveness in the South China Sea. There have been lots of escalating clashes between China's Navy and the Philippines along the disputed waterways.
Beijing has also grown increasingly assertive in challenging the Philippines' maritime presence. China claims almost all of the South China Sea, marked through its 9-dash line, where the Philippines has competing claims over the Scarborough Shoal. Beijing rejected a 2016 international ruling that found its assertions have no legal basis. Yet the People's Liberation Army has repeatedly tried to restrict Philippine Coast Guard efforts to resupply its forces at the Second Thomas Shoal.
We will protect our sovereign rights and preserve our territorial integrity in defense of a rules-based international order.
But experts say attempts to modernize the country's military have come way too little, way too late. The country's military has focused primarily on tackling domestic threats for decades, like insurgency, terrorism, and disaster relief. External defense, like the threat of China, has quickly moved up the agenda.
Until quite recently, like I think the last 3 or 4 years, the Philippines was actually operating with a lot of old and secondhand equipment that it received from other countries like the US. And some of these ships, for example, are actually decommissioned ones that were used during the Vietnam War and are now being redeployed in the Philippines.
I saw for myself the need to speed up the development of these Philippine bases in order to serve a total national security picture of our country.
The proposed defense budget for 2024 was 232 billion pesos, or $4.1 billion US. The modernization project provisionally allotted a target 20% of the spending, but it is unclear how far the funds will go with a costly hardware list for Horizon 3.
For example, one of the big buys for the modernization is supposedly its first submarine fleet. But it's also lacking infrastructure in other areas that China does have.
Countries like the US and Japan have pledged to support the upgrade, while Manila has also looked for ways to cut costs on a grander scale.
The military also spends a huge amount of its money on personal expenses like wages and like pension reform, which has been really controversial for straining the Philippines' finances. So there's legislation to review that at the moment. It's unclear if it will pass, but that's been flagged as one of the key ways for the military to balance its budget.
It's clear the Philippines is far behind its neighbors in terms of its military prowess. But Manila has made it a priority to close the gap, and to close it quickly.
Ay sama-samang buo ng akal ng lakas sa pagharap at pananagumpay.
President Bongbong Marcos is set to meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in San Francisco amid growing tensions in the West Philippine Sea. The meeting of Marcos and Xi will come after the Philippine leader met with U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris. Marcos says the discussion with Harris centered on Beijing's persistent encroachment in Philippine waters, adding that they tried to discuss some of the ways forward in addressing the maritime row. According to Marcos, the Philippines is continuously trying to maintain the peace.
After that, we'll put together the ways forward because we are continuously trying to maintain the peace. And now that's what I see the mission of the Philippines, the Philippine Coast Guard, the Philippine military, our fishermen, all of us. Is our basic fundamental mission here is to maintain the peace.
On November 10, a Chinese ship again fired a water cannon on a Philippine boat on its way to bring supplies to troops stationed at BRP Sierra Madre in Ayungin Shoal. Marcos says he will discuss with Xi ways not to escalate the situation in the West Philippine Sea.
Again, we will get the view of the Chinese president on what we can do to bring down the temperature, to not escalate the situation in the West Philippine Sea. And we will put all of these together so as we'll be able to strategize for the near future on what the Philippines' role will be, or what is the proper Philippines role in the West Philippines.